All right, I'm going to call this public hearing of the Kirkland Meadows Public Utility District into order. Do roll call.
Sure. Commander Rotunda,
Here.
Epstein. Absent. Roder,
Here.
Duker.
Can you hear me?
Here. Yeah, we can. We can hear you,
Okay,
John.
thanks.
And Dornbrook here.
All right, let's move on to agenda item number 3, announcements.
Yes, I'd like to welcome everybody to today's public hearing. If you were present here today during the portion where the board president will ask if there's any questions, please raise your hand. And if you are here, please come to the podium, identify yourself if you would like, and make your comment. If you are attending today's public hearing online, just use your raise your hand feature and the board president will identify you and allow you to speak when appropriate as well.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for those announcements. We'll move on to agenda item number 4, public hearing. This is the public hearing and possible action on proposed changes in fire and emergency medical service assessment and determination of protests received. So this is the time and the place for the public hearing on the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utilities District proposal to impose a new special benefit fire assessment to replace the district's existing assessment. This public hearing is held under the applicable provisions of Proposition 218 in the California Government Code. The public hearing is now officially open, and I have a gavel that is for our fire engine to use to signify that. Before the public comments, public provides comment, the general manager and the district's assessment engineer will make a presentation on the proposed new assessment. After that, the board will receive oral and written comments from all interested persons. When all comments have been received, the public hearing will be closed. The district's designated impartial persons will tabulate all ballots received by the close of the public hearing and not withdrawn. If the majority of the ballots returned, weighted according to each parcel's proposed assessment, do not oppose the proposed assessment, then the board will deliberate on adopting a resolution to approve and implement the new assessment at its regular meeting in this room at 2 p.m. today. If the majority of weighted votes are against the proposed assessment, then the proceedings will be terminated. So I'll now call on the district's general manager and the assessment engineer to provide the presentation for agenda item 4A.
Thank you. At the January 2nd, 2026 regular board meeting, the board of directors received the engineer's report for the proposed new special benefit fire assessment and authorized today's public hearing to take comment on the proposed assessment. Count the votes for and against the proposal, and if a majority do not oppose the proposed assessment, to consider adopting and implementing a new assessment at its meeting this afternoon, 2 p.m. On February 13th, 2026, the district mailed a notice of today's public hearing to all district landowners. So we have a brief presentation that we'd like to just to remind and recap where we are and how we got here. So we'll bring the PowerPoint up now.
And you're presenting on there you go. Perfect. Nice.
There we go. Cool. So yeah, let's move that out of the way for now. Thank you. So let's go to the next slide, please. So brief history. As you all recall, back in 2023, we he's on mute. Again, just to recap, so back in 2023, the district tried to approve a special tax to help fund the fire department. We heard from the community voted no on the special tax. And so since that time, we've had several public hearings, surveys, along with numerous discussions, as you can see on this slide here, to basically talk about funding the fire department. So that's a kind of a brief history of how we got here. On the next slide, from those discussions, surveys, multiple meetings with outside agencies such as Amador Fire Protection District, Lake Valley Fire Protection District, as well as Eastern Alpine County Fire, We zeroed it down to what the community was really asking for, which is basically a level of service that was affordable for the community, as well as provided a minimum level of care and or service for the community. And so where we ended up in this slide here is, potentially an agreement with Eastern Alpine County to provide fire services, essentially one paid firefighter, EMT, a stipend volunteer, as well as supervision, i.e. chief, to help steer and direct the fire department. This again is the bare minimum we believe that would be adequate and sufficient to provide EMS and fire, and mostly fire services for the valley and basic level EMS services for the community of Kirkwood. As you know, we in January approved a preliminary engineer's report, and within that engineer's report, we're going to have Ed Espinoza kind of give a brief summary of what's within the engineer's report, starting with the assessment methodology.
Good morning, Kirkwood community. My name is Ed Espinoza with Francisco & Associates. Our firm specializes in the formation and administration of assessment districts and other types of special financing districts, such as community facilities districts. Belarus, as your general manager mentioned, we were brought in almost a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago or so, to see what can be done to create a new assessment, a proposed assessment to generate funding for fire services in the community. And so the goal in terms of the process to get there as a starting point is we must comply with the requirements of Proposition 218. Proposition 218 went into effect in what was passed by California voters in 1996 and went into effect in 97. And it completely changed the requirements and the procedures as it relates to establishing a new assessment or increasing existing assessments. And some of those requirements are, the primary requirements are, first and foremost, a public agency must identify and quantify general benefit to the public at large versus special benefit to property. And the portion of a budget that's attributed to the general benefit to the public at large cannot be funded through the assessments, meaning property owners cannot pay the portion of the budget that corresponds to the general benefit component of a budget. The second thing is once the benefit analysis has been done, the general benefit has been identified and quantified and separated, the special benefit must be allocated to all property owners within the boundaries of the district proportionately to the benefit received, because there's different types of land uses, commercial property, residential property. And within those umbrellas, on the residential side, there's different product types as well: single family homes, condominiums, multifamily, things of that nature. So the special benefit must be apportioned proportionately based on benefit received. And so when that benefit analysis has been done, the assessment methodology has been derived. The last step is to prepare an engineer's report. The engineer's report by law must be prepared by a registered engineer in the state of California. So I'm a PE, registered engineer in California. And so in collaboration with district staff, we prepared that engineer's report. That engineer's report was approved by your board. And it is what has got us to this point, which is essentially that the notices and ballots have been mailed out in accordance with the methodology and the analysis that is conveyed in that engineer's report. Every property owner received a notice, a ballot. The ballot is tailored to each property owner, meaning your specific proposed assessment was provided in that ballot. So you know exactly what you're voting on. And the notice outlines, provides some background information. It provides a brief summary of the assessment methodology, the basis of the assessment, if you will, and then also the procedures to submit a ballot and how the ballot tabulation works and how the results will be determined. So just to give the community and property owners a brief recap of the assessment methodology and what was conveyed in your ballots. The proposed assessment is segregated into two components. The first component being the land component. And what the land component does is it's an acknowledgement that fire protection services protect land and it preserves property values, right? So that's one component. The second is the improved component. The improved component is a reflection, and it represents the fact that fire protection services also protect structures and people. So those are the lens that we were looking at it from in terms of how to apportion the special benefit side of the budget, and how we were able to break up what portion of the special assessment should be attributed to the land component versus the improved component. We took a look at property values within Kirkwood, so it's specific to the boundaries of Kirkwood, KMPUD, and we looked at county assessor data because we wanted to make sure that we use data that is reliable and also that we can apply consistently across the board throughout the boundaries of the district. And what we found is that about 25% of the land values within the boundaries of the district is attributed to the underlying land of all the properties, and 75% is attributed to the improved value. So if you notice on your property tax bill, you'll have what's referred to as the ad valorem portion of the tax bill, and you'll notice that there's a land value and an improved value on your property tax bill. And so that's what we're getting at here with the second bullet is that distinction there between land value and improved value. And we looked at it in aggregate as a whole within in Kirkwood, and that's how we were able to break up the assessment into the land component and the improved component. The land component is applicable to all properties within the boundaries of the district, and it was applied on a flat rate per lot square foot. So we are able to determine the lot square footage or the acreage of every property. We have county assessor data that allows us to identify that acreage, and we apply the land component based on parcel area. The improved component is based on land use and industry standard service population. And what that allowed us to do is determine what's commonly referred to in the assessment world as equivalent dwelling units. The reason we need to use equivalent dwelling units is because it's important to establish proportionality in the assessment, right? And it goes back to the concept that I mentioned earlier about ensuring that the special benefit is allocated to all properties in proportion to the special benefit received. So establishing proportionality in the assessment is very key. So to do that, equivalent dwelling units is what is commonly utilized, not just for what we did in Kirkwood, but just if you look at engineers' reports for all different types of assessments, whether it be for parks, landscaping, street lighting, geologic hazard abatement districts, you'll commonly see this equivalent dwelling unit concept. And what you'll also see is that single family homes are virtually always assigned a equivalent dwelling unit factor of 1 because it's the most common property type. So it's essentially the baseline, right? So the equivalent, the single family home is usually always an EDU of 1. And then everything, all the other land uses are a ratio of that single family home unit of 1. So that table that you see at the very bottom of this slide provides that proportionality, if you will. Single family homes equal to or greater than 1750 building square feet were assigned a EDU factor of 1. The reason 1750 was used as a cutoff point is because there's real estate data in California, and also we looked at the database in Kirkwood specifically. The average single family home is about 1750. There was actually real estate data statewide that pointed to 1750. When we looked at Kirkwood, it was about 1740. So it's very consistent with the 1750 cutoff point, if you will. And so what we did is single family homes equal to or greater than that 1750 threshold were assigned a benefit factor of 1. If you're a single family home, condo or timeshare less than the 1750 building square feet, you were treated more similar to a condominium. It's very common for condominiums to be assigned an EDU factor of about 75% that of a standard single family home. So the 0.75 factor was applied to those properties. And then you had all the other land uses, employee housing. It was about a third per unit. And then for non-residential property, it was based on employee population per 1,000 building square feet. And that's where these other EDUs factors come into play. Commercials 2/3, EDUs per 1,000 building square feet. Office, it was 1 per 1,000 building square feet. And industrial property, it was 1/3 per the EDUs per 1,000 building square feet. The other notable point as it relates to the assessment methodology is when we're talking about commercial property specifically, commercial properties create a higher demand on fire protection services and therefore receive a greater special benefit from these services. And what we did to determine that additional impact or additional benefit, if you will, is we looked at historical energy usage data in Kirkwood. We went back 10 years time and we looked at historical energy usage, and we used that as compared to a baseline of properties in Kirkwood that are here year round. We were able to identify those based on water usage data. We were able to see or to determine which properties are generally here year round. And so using that baseline, we looked at peak season and we were able to quantify a factor of 2.3 as this additional benefactor that's applied to commercial properties in Kirkwood. And by applying that factor of 2.3 and also comparing it to the budget, the budget that we were given that we need to apportion for this, the general benefit and the special benefit, these rates is what was the final the final result essentially, and what was used to determine every property's proposed assessment. So when it comes to residential properties, the land component was assessed at this 0.002024 dollars per lot square foot. The improved component was assessed at $348.17 per EDU. And the total assessment is the sum of the two components. So that's what ultimately made its way into your ballot. On the commercial side and commercial office parcels, same concept. The only difference is the additional benefit factor of 2.3 was applied. And so that's why you see that difference in the rates. But same concept, land component, all properties that fall into the commercial office space category were assessed at $0.004656 dollars per lot square foot, and the improved component was assessed at $800.78 per EDU, and the number of EDUs varies depending on if it's commercial, office, or industrial. And then same as residential, the total assessment is the sum of the land component and the improved component. So the assessment that you saw in your ballots is in fiscal year 26-27 dollars. It would go into effect as of July 1st of this year. Each subsequent fiscal year, should this assessment be passed by property owners and your board, the assessment it will increase by the annual change in the consumer price index as published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And that first increase would go into effect on July 1st of 2027. So next year. And the 10-year average on that CPI has been about 3%. Obviously, the last few years, inflation has been different, as we all know. But the 10-year average, it's hovered in that 3% annual change. Okay. So these are just two examples, one on the residential side and the other on the commercial side. On the residential side, this is an average single-family home parcel of about 18,000 lot square feet. If you apply the rate per square foot, you get the $36.43. So as you can see, the land component is the smallest portion of the total assessment. The improved component is the 1 EDU. The assumption here is that this single-family home it has building square feet greater or equal to the 1750. And for that reason, it was assessed at the $348.17. The sum between the two components is $384.60. So this property owner would have received a ballot that conveyed this $384.60. On the commercial side, the assumption here for this example was a parcel that has a lot square footage of 20,000. If the rate per square foot of commercial is applied, it gets us to a land component of $93.12. And then the improved component for a commercial property times the EDU rate of $800.78 with an assumption of 2,000 building square feet gets us to an assessment value for the improved component of $1,067.71. And the sum of the two is $1,160.83. So this commercial property, that's the assessment that this ballot would have conveyed there. With that, I'm more than happy to address any questions either the board or the community may have on the engineer's report, the assessment, or the process in general. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you for the presentation. So the board will now receive comments from property owners and other interested parties on the proposed fire assessment. Before we begin, I'd like to set some rules for the hearing to make everything work efficiently. First, it would be helpful if everyone who's planning to speak today could limit their comments to 3 minutes so everyone has time to make their comments. Although it's not required, the board requests that you give your name and address for the record. Third, if your comments are similar to those made by a previous individual, please briefly mention that your comments echo the previous speaker's remarks. And then finally, please be respectful. Avoid speaking out when others are speaking so that the board members and the public can hear the speaker's remarks. So we have one written comment that is printed here for people in the room that came in yesterday. It's from Michelle Serza, and I'm not sure if Michelle is on the line. If she's not, and I can read the comment, but otherwise we'll go through people in the room. Please come to the podium. Anyone online, please raise your hand, and then we'll allow you to talk. Okay, I see one hand up from possibly Michelle Serza. Okay, go ahead. Michelle, you are unmute yourself, please.
Hi there. I'm Michelle Serza. I am a 20-year Kirkwood homeowner at the Mountain Club and more recently at Sentinels West. If you could read my entire comment and letter out loud, I'd appreciate that. I would also like to distill it. I mean, it sounds like there's been a great explanation of what Prop 218 is. In terms of special event benefits versus general benefits, but I'm still unclear on how the proposed assessment complies with that, because it sounds to me like, for it to truly be a special benefit, then the fire department and emergency services would only respond to issues affecting and started by homeowners. It's like, would the fire department and emergency services not respond to a fire or medical emergency affecting a member of the general public at Kirkwood? I mean, that seems ridiculous. So, and in general, it just seems to me like a lot of time and money and energy have been wasted on a proposal that doesn't comply with a lot of modern standards or a fundamental purpose of special assessments versus general benefit assessments, and also doesn't take into consideration the cost allocation between commercial and residential as it affects the HOAs that are serving as part-time hotel lodging for Vail Resorts. So, I mean, there's a lot of flaws with this, and I'm also not interested in bare minimum requirements for our community. I'm interested in in studies about what the community actually needs, and then developing solutions that meet those needs, and then funding them properly. I realize my time is running out here, but I would like to also understand how I vote no on this assessment. And I was informed that I would be able to do so at this hearing.
Okay, so let me, I wrote down some questions here. Let me read your statement that you emailed to us so that we have that, and then we can address questions or your comments. So dear Rick, Doug, and Rick, I'm writing as a property owner and stakeholder in the Kirkwood community to respectfully request that the KMPD board pause and reconsider the proposed fire services assessment. This request is based on 4 concerns. 1, compliance with California Proposition 218 requirements. 2, the absence of current data-driven services needs analysis. 3, the need to align planning with updated statewide wildfire hazard designations. And 4, potential inequities and cost allocation related to lodging commercial use of residential units. For part 1 here, Proposition 218 compliance special benefit requirement. Under Article 13D of the California Constitution, Proposition 218, assessments may fund only special benefits conferred on parcels, not general public benefits. California courts have emphasized that agencies must separate and quantify general benefits, those accruing to the public at large. Only parcel-specific benefits may be assessed to property owners. Fire protection, wildfire mitigation, and emergency response services often include substantial general benefit components, particularly in areas with significant visitor populations and surrounding public lands. In resort communities such as Kirkwood, characterized by heavy seasonal visitation, extensive surrounding wildland areas, and public road and infrastructure exposure, it is not evident that fire protection services can be allocated solely as a special benefit to parcels as required by Proposition 218. Ed, should I read the whole thing, or do you want to respond as we go through them?
We can, whatever you prefer, board member, we could respond.
Why don't we respond as we go through them? I think it's easier to remember that.
That sounds good. So first of all, I appreciate the comments and the feedback, and property owner is most definitely correct about the requirement to identify and quantify general benefit and all of that. So we did take a look at the general benefit to the public at large. As a matter of fact, there's a section in the engineer's report that specifically discusses and describes what was done on that front. Page 7 and 8 of the engineer's report goes into some detail as to how general benefit was determined. As a starting point, what we did to analyze general benefit to the public at large is we collaborated with district staff, your fire chief, in terms of understanding what the services that would be provided are and who they benefit. And what our understanding is that the benefit of the fire protection services is virtually all of it is to properties within the boundaries of Kirkwood. There is some
But also people in the boundaries of Kirkwood, the general,
correct.
not just.
That's correct. Yeah. So, but what we're establishing with Prop 218 is benefit to property, right? So the fact that fire services are available within the boundaries of Kirkwood makes properties within Kirkwood more appealing. They enhance property values. It's reasonable to assume that the presence of adequate and consistent fire services has a positive impact on property values. So what we did from there, though, is we also understand that impact is not the same within all properties within Kirkwood. But just to go back to the point about general benefit, because it's a very good question and a very good comment. We understand that the fire protection services, as a starting point, they're not intended to address wildfire prevention. And Rick, please correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it's not wildfire prevention, because that would be obviously, you know, a greater benefit to the public at large and the neighboring areas. The fire services are not that. So that's one thing. The second thing is, we also looked at, are there any publicly owned properties within the boundaries, or, you know, public right of way, if you will, that we cannot assess. And we took a look at that. There's a very small portion of property within the boundaries of Kirkwood that is public right of way. So we quantified the portion that is that. The third thing that we did is we looked at flow through traffic, right, on the 88, because I believe you mentioned this, that fire protection services and emergency response often can service perhaps vehicles or some traffic incidents that happen on the 88. When we looked at the response data provided by district staff, less than 10% of the calls were attributed to vehicle emergency response. And so, given all of that, we felt very comfortable that, as a conservative assumption, that 10% of the fire protection budget is attributed to general benefit. So if you look at the engineer's report on those pages that I mentioned, page 7 and 8, it assigns 10%, a minimum of 10% of the budget cannot be assessed to property owners within Kirkwood. So in effect, what that means is 90% is what the assessment can be based on. With that said, the district is actually exceeding that minimum 10% contribution, because a big part of the annual budget is coming from property tax revenue. And so the minimum is 10%, but the district is actually contributing more than the 10. And therefore that's what
tax revenue.
What's that?
What about transient tax revenue?
I'm not sure about that. Is transient
TOT is included in our property tax.
It is included. Okay. So to answer your question, Michelle, it sounds like it's a combination of both. If I look at let me see here. If we look at the cost estimate of cost page of the engineer's report, I believe it provides a brief description of that. So it says that about $480,000 annually in fiscal year 26-27 dollars is coming from property taxes, and it sounds like perhaps that's a combination of the transient and the the ad valorem revenue that the district receives. So $480,000.
I'm sorry, that doesn't make any sense. Property tax and transient occupancy tax are two different things. So also, if I'm understanding correctly, so KMPUD is not taking into consideration wildfire and not taking into consideration fire services for the members of the general public who might be at Kirkwood. And is primarily taking into consideration protection of the property for real estate value purposes. So what about life safety issues?
It does take into account. So again, with Prop 218 as it relates to assessments, it's benefit to property, because regardless of who owns a property at any given time, the assessment must be applicable forward, right? And so in terms of looking at the general benefit, those were the components that we looked at. We looked at what are the services being provided, and who do they benefit. And again, it's my understanding that they primarily benefit properties within Kirkwood.
I see protection of the properties as benefiting primarily the developers. I'm interested in
No, the property
protecting, I'm
owners.
interested in benefiting the people who are here in the Kirkwood community, the people who need the ambulances to show up, the people, the visitors, guests of Vail Resorts, transient people in the Kirkwood community, hotel guests are more likely to start fires than our residents because they're not familiar with the buildings. And that's more of a general benefit than and a commercial benefit than it is a benefit to homeowners.
Well, so first of all, I agree that the commercial properties
This new
do receive
approach to protecting the Kirkwood community for and addressing the needs of the overall Kirkwood community for fire and emergency medical services.
Yeah, so it's a great comment. So first, I agree that the commercial properties receive a greater benefit, and for that reason, they're proportionally assessed at a higher rate.
But without
Because
taking into consideration that a lot of the HOA, the residential units are serving part-time as hotel lodging. Within 6 HOAs, I asked this question at the previous KMPUD meeting and nobody responded to me with an answer. Despite
on that, what we
Brandy
looked at,
saying that she would. Now I don't fault Brandy for that. I'm at all. But this nobody addresses. There's a long-standing problem right now in the Kirkwood community with leaders not addressing problems and concerns directly and answering questions directly.
so going back to like the lodging and all that. So what we looked at is parcel characteristics, not necessarily who the owner is. So if the property is individually owned and it looks and is very similar, if not identical, in terms of parcel characteristics to another property that is owned by an individual homeowner versus, the resort or any other commercial entity, they're assessed the same, right? Because the ownership can change and the transient nature of that individual property.
Please let him finish speaking.
I'm sorry. Okay.
You keep interrupting him. Please let him finish.
Okay. My apologies.
So the other thing I'd like to point out is, as an assessment engineer, we prepare the methodology. We feel very good about it. We do this all across the state, as I mentioned. With that said, we always collaborate and confer with legal counsel to ensure compliance with Prop 218, and we've done that here. So we feel very confident that the methodology is solid. It's been apportioned. We've addressed and we've identified general benefit. We've established proportionality as it relates to the special benefit, and so all of that is outlined in the engineer's report. And I'd be more than happy to discuss any of the various sections if there's any follow-up questions on that.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move on to your second point here. Absence of current fire and EMS needs assessments. To date, it does not appear that the current comprehensive study has been conducted to evaluate fire protection service levels needed for the Kirkwood community, emergency medical services, EMS coverage, including off-hours conditions, seasonal population fluctuations, residents, visitors, and resort guests, response times, staffing levels, and infrastructure capacity, evacuation constraints, and access limitations. Existing planning documents for the community are in many cases decades old and may not reflect current population and visitation patterns, modern wildfire behavior, or contemporary life-saving planning standards. Proceeding with a funding mechanism before establishing the actual service need raises both policy and legal concerns. Ed or Rick, do you have anything to respond to this?
I think what I would say to that is this isn't a cost of service proceeding, and so what my understanding is the contract and the negotiations with the county, what made its way into the engineer's report in terms of the budget is what the experts believe at this time that is adequate in terms of fire protection services. And so in terms of the assessment itself, what we're required to do is spread the assessment based on benefit to property, right? But it's not we're not required to look at compare or conduct this comprehensive study in the way of like water rate studies are done and things of that nature, because those are more so cost of service related versus benefit to property. So, I maybe defer to Rick as far as like, why we landed on the contract that we did and why that's adequate for the district, but perhaps maybe you can provide some.
Yeah, and as I illustrated in one of the slides in the PowerPoint, we've had numerous discussions about this, about the fire department's master plan. There's been 2 master plans created since the department was started. But essentially, again, we came up with a response of what the community asked for, which was to provide minimal level of fire protection services for those properties. And didn't feel that we needed to go into more formal surveys and or essentially spend more time and money to get to the basic offer or ballot offer for funding that we have today.
So it's not a problem that no studies have been conducted about the needs of the community for fire and emergency medical services, and that all of this is happening in the context of an overall plan that was developed in 2003. That's not a problem at all.
I don't believe it's a problem.
That's industry standard. If we brought in experts from outside the Kirkwood community, they would say that's, perfectly fine.
I can't say for what experts say, but my
Urban land-
opinion, I
urban
believe
land-
that we've done our due diligence to get to the point that we are today.
It just does, it seems to defy logic and common sense and good
Michelle,
business.
Michelle, this is Chris. Is it your point of view that when you talk about needs assessment, that we have a greater need or a smaller need than the proposal that has been put to ballot?
The proposal put to ballot seems to only address property issues. It doesn't
No,
seem
I'm
to.
asking about
It's
needs
so greater.
assessment. I'm asking about needs assessment. You seem to be implying that we underestimate the need, but I'm not even sure. Maybe you think we
well,
overestimate the need?
No, what I'm saying is nobody studied the needs. I mean,
We-
there's
studied
no
them just-
study.
no.
It seems logical. You study what the needs are. I mean, what's the historical? How many times does an ambulance have to come to Kirkwood during off hours, average during the year? Who's
We
calling?
study that need and discuss that need on a regular basis at
I
these
haven't seen
meetings.
any studies, Chris.
These discussions and reports take place at these public meetings almost on a monthly basis. So
Okay.
I'll stop.
Yeah. So can I just go back for 1 second to something Ed said, because thank you, Ed, on the cost allocation thing. I think that one of the disconnects here might be a lack of understanding about the extent to which our HOA units are serving as part-time hotels for Vail Resorts. And so you can't look at, I think it's flawed to look at residential units because they have an owner as purely residential. It is flawed. And I will give you an example. Our unit in the Mountain Club, which that could be an entire conversation, and it will be at another time. Our unit in the Mountain Club, we have to rent it to Vail Resorts full time in order to be able to afford the HOA dues. So that is not a residential unit. That is a commercial unit. Okay. So that is just one example. And that issue affects a lot of people in the Mountain Club. A lot of people in the Mountain Club cannot afford to use their own units because the HOA dues have gotten so high under unlawful governance that we're forced to rent it out to Vail.
Michelle, this is not I just be clear, this is not an HOA meeting. And so I want to give Kitch Ed the chance. Is a residential unit that is, you said this before, how it is used in service, whether it's rented, whether it's a house in any of our other HOAs or whether it's there, is that considered, did you consider how it is managed as a property or how it is characterized?
How it's characterized, board member. So because the ownership can be transferred, right? So what we looked at is we took county data and we looked at county use codes, independent of what you can and can't do through your HOA, because as the board mentioned, the HOA restrictions and all of that, that's a separate matter. But if your unit is, if you have a parcel, an APN, assessor parcel number, and and then there's a separate APN within the same complex. In theory, they have the same parcel characteristics, right? The same benefit to property, and you can sell or somebody else can buy, and they'll have a different opinion of the HOA and what that looks like. So we did not factor in HOA restrictions or any of that. We looked at parcel characteristics, property characteristics, and we looked at that uniformly, regardless of who owned it. With that said, there are some housing, like for example, employee housing type residential uses that are associated with commercial property, and those we did look at it from a different lens. So,
There are excuse me, I'm sorry, there are 6 HOAs that are associated with commercial property, because there are at least 6 HOAs that if you go on Vail's website, that they are using as lodging for their Epic Pass guests. Our HOAs form a hotel system for Vail Resorts. So at least part-time. So the characterization of those units that are serving as part-time hotels as purely residential is a mischaracterization.
I'm sorry to jump in here. This is Chris again. This sounds like a very important issue. It does not sound like an issue for KMPUD. I'm sorry, but I have a neighbor who, I'm sorry, please let me speak. I have a neighbor whose house stands empty. He doesn't come to Kirkwood. He could argue that he gets less specific value or benefit from his property than I do. I have a neighbor who rents his house on Airbnb, a single family house, not an HOA, but does that make the East Meadows HOA suddenly a commercial entity? I mean, we can take these arguments to absurdum, and we've explained the methodology, and let's move on to the next section.
Thank you. All right. Number 3, need to incorporate updated CAL FIRE 2024 hazard mapping. The state of California, through CAL FIRE, updated fire hazard severity zone maps effective in 2024. These maps reflect current wildfire science, climate-driven risk factors, and recent fire behavior patterns. For the Kirkwood area, updated mapping indicates portions of the developed village in moderate zones, but the community broadly surrounded by high and very high hazard zones. This creates a materially different risk context than earlier planning frameworks that characterize the area more generally as moderate. Any fire services funding proposal should therefore be grounded in planning assumptions consistent with the current hazard environment and analysis that reflects the community's location within a high to extreme wildfire landscape. Ed, Rick.
Yeah, so yes, we were aware that the CAL FIRE did update their hazard mapping, and this is just part of being in the Kirkwood Valley. The mapping has changed, but essentially, I really don't have anything more to add or comment about her comments here.
Okay. All right. Number 4, cost allocation concerns lodging and commercial use of residential units. Is my understanding that a number of residential units across multiple HOAs within Kirkwood are being used, at least in part, as short-term lodging accommodations associated with resort operations. This raises important questions regarding whether the current engineer's report adequately accounts for commercial lodging use intensity of these units, distinguishes between purely residential use and units functioning as part-time lodging or hotel inventory, properly allocates fire and emergency service costs based on actual demand drivers, including transient occupancy, high turnover rates, and increased service calls associated with visitor use. Residential units are functioning in practice as a part of a broader lodging system serving resort visitors. Then a significant portion of fire and emergency service demand may be attributable to a commercial or visitor servicing activity rather than solely the residential parcel benefit. There is a risk that homeowners may be disproportionately bearing costs associated with supporting lodging operations. Under Proposition 218, this distinction is critical. Costs attributable to visitors, commercial operations, or broader community protection must be carefully evaluated to determine whether they constitute general benefit or non-assessable cost components, or whether they should be allocated differently. At minimum, the engineer's report should be transparently address how lodging use is treated in the analysis, whether different land use intensities are reflected in cost allocation, how proportionality is ensured across parcel types. So for those 3 bullet points, I think we've talked about all of them. The lodging use itself is not the standard practice for this, it sounds like, so that is not considered. Whether different land use intensities are reflected in cost allocations, we did do that. We did use different intensities. The commercial does have a different intensity than residential. And then how proportionality is ensured across parcel types. And that's, I think, baked into the way that the methodology worked out, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I think we addressed all three bullets.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time on this and your answers. And I just need to know how I vote no.
It was a ballot.
Well,
I was informed that I could to vote during the meeting and change my vote during the meeting, because I raised concerns about having the public hearing before voting. And I was informed that I could place my vote during the meeting.
It should be noted that there have also been previous public meetings on this topic.
Yep.
So this is not by any means the first presentation of what we saw today.
Yeah, but it's the first public hearing where you've gotten to, I mean, come on. Again, logic. It's anyway.
Thanks.
Michelle, this isn't
Yeah.
we had a community forum on December 30th. They had this
Yep, I know.
exact presentation. And so
Yeah.
the public hearing, I will say it again, because multiple people asked this, this is the formal process by 218 law that we are following.
Okay. Very good.
This is the way it works. And if you do not like it, I'm sorry for that, but this is the way it works.
That's fine. I got it. Thank you.
Ed, do you want to respond to the?
yeah, just to respond about how to submit or change your ballot. You would actually have to be here in person, and the reason being is because the ballot must be signed by the property owner and must be submitted to the clerk by the end of the public input portion this morning. So
Okay.
if ballots are not in by then, or a request to withdraw or change it is not done before then,
By state law.
by state law. Yes,
Okay.
that's the cutoff.
Understood. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your interest in Michelle comments. I appreciate them very much. Really, genuinely, I appreciate the conversations here. You're asking great questions, and I appreciate you pushing on us to make sure we're covering our bases. But I do believe that we have, and I appreciate Ed and Francisco Associates for helping us on this journey.
That's great questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. I do not see any other hands up online, and I do not see anyone coming to the podium in the room. Are there any further comments?
May I ask just a couple of
Sure.
detailed questions?
Yeah.
We spoke about the general benefit and we spoke about public access areas. How is the parking lot treated and how is the plaza itself treated?
So everything is privately owned within the Kirkwood, except those few areas that I mentioned. In terms of parking lots, we looked at what they're ancillary to, the parking lot.
I'm talking about the big parking lot.
Yeah, it's basically they got the land component. The land component of the assessment is how those properties were assessed.
I don't even know who owns the big parking lot there or these ones outside our window.
I'd have to look at the database, but if let's just say if this is its own assessor parcel, we looked at the parcel area and that parcel would have been assigned the land component. That's how the assessment was applied, and if it's attributable to commercial, then it would have gotten the intensity factor on the land.
Does anybody happen to know who owns the big?
I don't think it matters, right?
Okay.
All right. Are there any further comments? Because seeing none at this point, before I do formally close the public comments of this hearing, this is the last call for any property owners who still wish to submit a ballot, withdraw it, or to change their vote here in person. So if you're going to do that, please see Ed Espinoza or Maxwell Goins in the back of the room here. Because for the purpose of tabulating the ballots, only the ones that are valid filled in by this time will be counted. So I will wait a couple seconds here. Okay. I see no movement physically in this room. Nothing online. So I declare that the public comment here is closed with our fire engine gavel.
Right on the speakerphone.
Right on the speaker. Oh, no, that was right there too. So on behalf of the Tyrant Board, I want to thank the KMP property owners and other interested persons attending today for their willingness to take time from their day to participate in this hearing. So we're going to now move on to agenda item 4C, which is the ballot tally and determination of protests. So at this time, I will direct Francisco and Associates, with Ed Espinoza in particular, his team, to open and tabulate all timely received ballots and tabulate the weighted votes for and against the proposed assessment. When the tabulation is complete, I will call the meeting back into session. So we'll be taking a recess and ask Ed Espinoza to announce the vote tabulation and advise the board if the proposed assessment is approved or rejected. A vote to approve the assessment requires landowners with a minimum of 50% of all weighted votes to vote for the assessment. If the question receives less than 50%, the proposed assessment will fail and the proceedings will be terminated. All interested members of the public may observe the ballot tabulation as it occurs. But before we recess for the tabulation, I would ask Ed to briefly explain the tabulation process for us.
Thank you, board member. So the tabulation process, first of all, in accordance with Prop 218, it must be done in a public setting. So anybody, any party that's interested in viewing the process can come and do so. We will be tabulating here behind us. Generally, the process, how it works is all ballots are required to remain sealed up until tabulation time. So every property owner got a prepaid postage return envelope. All ballots are sealed. They've been sealed this whole time. So the first step is to open up all the return envelopes. We have a process where we pass all the ballots through, open up all the envelopes through. We open up all the envelopes, take all the ballots out. Then from there, what is also required by Prop 218 is every ballot must be signed, and the yes or no vote must be clearly marked. So the second step is to ensure that the ballot is valid on those two fronts, either yes or no. You'd be surprised how many times yes and no are marked, or neither. So the first step is to make sure the ballot is a valid ballot and signed. And then the next is to clearly segregate yes and no ballots, and then we every ballot has a barcode, and we scan in all the ballots. As was discussed throughout this board meeting, the ballots are weighted by the proposed assessment. So just because the number of ballots is higher on either side doesn't necessarily mean it's pass or fail, right? Because it's dollar amount at the end of the day. So it's essentially $1 or one vote per dollar, if you will. For that reason, we scan every ballot. All the scanned ballots are compared to the Kirkwood database because that's where we have all the proposed amounts, and that's how we're able to determine majority protests based on the proposed amounts. The last step that happens really concurrently is we have mailed out many replacement ballots. Some property owners. The mailing address that was on file with the county wasn't up to date, and they reached out to district staff and requested that a replacement ballot be sent to their other property address or to their new property address, or some properties may have misplaced their ballot. So we've sent out many replacement ballots. Those replacement ballots look different than the original. And so the key there is to ensure that the replacement ballot supersedes any original that may have been turned in. So because at the end, we must make sure that it's one ballot per parcel. We can't count more than one ballot per parcel. So that all happens towards the end. We do that confirmation there, and we'll be ready to declare results here, hopefully in a couple hours. And we'll come back, I believe, at 1:30 or so to provide an update. So, any questions or process?
I have one final ballot that was printed yesterday, delivery to you today.
Okay. All right.
Very heavy ballot.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, this technically it had to have been done before
Before the gavel,
the
gavel.
Yeah.
that wasn't clear to me.
Yeah. With that said, I think
I mean,
You
of
were-
the 40 plus ballots that we got 2 of them in the mail originally. So whatever happened with this one that had to be printed and signed, like I'm giving it to you now. So
Can we reopen the public portion of the hearing and accept it?
yeah,
Yeah.
I believe so. And the gentleman was
Apologize.
sitting in the room throughout the entire meeting. I think it's just an administrative
Sure.
Yeah.
And I can do this without votes and as the board president. All right, so I will reopen the public hearing portion on agenda item 4B and ask anyone who would like to change, submit, or withdraw a ballot to please hand it to either Ed Espinoza or Maxwell Goins at this time.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
I'd like to submit. No
Thank you.
comment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I will give one last chance here to anyone else who would like to change,
Last
withdraw, or submit a ballot in person here in the room. I am still seeing no movement, so I am going to now close the public comment portion again. Okay, thank you, everyone. So with that, I will now put this meeting into a recess and we will reconvene today at 1:30 p.m. From there. Thank you, everyone. See you at 1:30.
Congratulations, Hunter.
Okay.
Right. It's not quite 1:30, so I'll give it another 30 seconds or so. All right, it's hit 1:30 on my clock, so we'll reconvene our meeting today. I will hand it over to Ed Espinoza to discuss the tallied results.
Thank you. So the ballots have been tabulated. All valid ballots were tabulated, that were submitted on or before the close of the public hearing. Ballots representing 103,716.26 of weighted parcels voted in favor of the assessment. And $141,585.97 of weighted parcels voted in opposition to the assessment. Therefore, the proposal for levying and collecting the new assessment did not pass 57.7% to 42.3%. And in terms of number of ballots returned, there were 398 yes ballots returned in favor of the proposed assessment, 155 ballots returned opposed to the proposed assessment, and there were 2 invalid ballots returned that were not marked yes or no on the ballot and therefore invalid. So a total of 555 ballots were returned. There were 1,088 mailed. So of the ballots mailed, 51% were returned. Those are the official results.
Thank you very much, Ed and team, for all the work that you did this afternoon to count these ballots. Because the proposed assessment was rejected by a majority of the weighted votes, the district is not authorized to proceed with approving the proposed assessment. I want to just say thank you to everyone who's been involved in this. It's been a long process that we've gone through for 2.5 years for this specific process. And we've had lots of community involvement and a lot of community input along the way. I think, we had a comment earlier today and even last week when Rick and I presented all this to the KCA, that there are still people that are here for 20 years who we still aren't reaching on the day-to-day of making sure they understand what we're working on here at the district. So I want to remind ourselves that we still have opportunities out there to get even more people involved when we have these important topics come up. But I would say overall, I'm very proud of the work that we've done as a board, the staff and our community coming together to consider this proposal. But that concludes this assessment process. And so therefore I will adjourn this meeting with no further action. Thank you all.
Doug.
You hear that? I think
John.
John wanted to say something.
I had a question if we could know what the unweighted vote was.
The
I will not adjourn
unweighted
this meeting. When I say adjourn this meeting, I'll say I meant not to at this point. So we can continue talking.
Sorry about that. I was waving my hands and electronically and physically, but,
Sure. The unweighted vote is the number of ballots returned, right? So the number of yes ballots returned was 398. And the number of no ballots returned was 155. So over 70% of your of ballots returned were in favor of the proposed assessment. So
okay.
which was
I
almost the
appreciate
same
it.
as the sample ballot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, John,
appreciate
if you're
that.
looking for the dollars left, it was 355 was the total dollars, right, Ed? And then, so this was 103 plus 141, which would be, you know,
Right.
about $110,000 of unvoted dollars.
Could you give that split again, please? I didn't.
So the total, the assessment value that the board was seeking was around approximately $355,000.
Yeah.
And the ballot, if I'm adding 141,000 plus $103,000, that means that there was approximately $110,000 worth of unresponsive ballots, which then, as we've discussed many times, aren't a part of this.
Yeah.
The majority. It's the ballots received.
Right.
Okay. And I'll also
Right.
remind people that this is not, those ballots does not indicate individual people, that's APNs. So if a large customer had, say, over 40 ballots, APNs, that isn't necessarily reflected in the fact that that's more than one counts of a yes or a no there too. So if someone had 10 or 20, 30, 40 of these, they're each individually counted here. So it's not individual voters per se. It is APNs. Okay.
Correct.
Doug, I'm just gonna put the results up here on the screen and also on
Can you
Zoom.
zoom it in? Can you zoom in a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And we'll be sure to post these results on the district's website. Hopefully today.
And so Doug, you were saying there's a little over 100,000 that didn't vote, worth of,
About 110,000 that didn't vote. That's right.
and what were the total number of ballots?
Total number of ballots mailed was 1,088. It's the asterisk there at the bottom, the footnote there at the bottom of the table.
Oh, I see it now. So 51% is, in your experience, is that a common turnout? 51%?
That's actually a really that's a really strong return. We usually see somewhere between 30 and 40% of around 40% is what we've been seeing lately. Last year, when we did a handful of assessment proceedings last year, and we saw around 40. So 51% is a strong return. So your community was definitely engaged and involved for sure.
Can you reveal what the value of the two invalids were?
The value, I'm sorry, of
The
what?
invalid, the two.
There were residential properties, I believe. I don't know the exact dollar amount. I'd have to look at, but it was
Okay, so
definitely enough.
relatively small. There wasn't a $50,000 invalid.
No, I don't think those two ballots would have swung the vote. I could say that pretty confidently without looking at the ballots, but I recall them being just the residential ballots, single family.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, any other questions before I actually adjourn the meeting? Okay, I will just say again, this proposed assessment was rejected by a majority of the weighted votes, so we are not authorized to proceed with approving this. I really, again, thank everyone. I think this has been a really great effort by lots of people to get this together to this point, and I'm really happy with the way that this process has worked. So thank you to Ed and your team. Thank you all for being here and for helping count this, and again, to the community for having an extraordinary turnout and for the participation. We've received so much good feedback along the way to help craft what we ended up coming out here to you all with ballot with. I will just remind you that we have our regular scheduled KMPD board meeting at 2 p.m., which we will then be able to discuss potentially what happens after this result. And with that, I will actually adjourn the meeting today. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.